A lot of recruiters and a lot of people who comment on job interviews, they have a bit of a conflict of interest because they themselves conduct job interviews. And they take this attitude where they're going to say like, listen, I'm your friend and advisor, and I'm going to advise you what to do. So when the interviewer asks you this is what I recommend you saying. And it can be very self-serving because they themselves are advising you to play right into their hand when they're interviewing. An example of that is the weakness question, right? When they say, tell me about your weakness or your greatest weakness or what are your weaknesses? And the answer I've heard over and over again, coincidentally, from people who interview people for jobs, recruiters and hiring managers, is they say, oh, how to answer the weakness question? Well, it's very simple. You should be honest. Just tell them exactly what your biggest weakness is, and then tell them how you're working on it. Because all we want to know is that you're self-aware, you recognize that you have weaknesses, and that, you are taking some steps to work on yourself. That's all we want to know, right? Tell me if you've heard that answer before. The problem is, in practice, what I've observed for years is that that's not how it goes down, First of all, the interviewer, what they're doing is they're doing a process of elimination. They're playing an elimination game. You start with, like, in the case of a posted job, you start with 800 applicants or whatever it is, that apply for the job. And then of those, you filter that down to like maybe 10 people, you might want to do a virtual interview with online. And then of those 10, you filter it down to maybe the final 3. And then of those, you filter down to 1, right? So it's all about eliminating people. Yes. For example, the people that you interview, usually on paper, all of them, every single one is qualified to do the job. You are looking for strengths. You're looking to see if people are qualified. Yes, great. And you have an overabundance of them in most cases. The problem is that you have to now eliminate 9 of these 10 people. You can't give the job to all 10. You have to eliminate them. So you have to find some way of paring down. And one of the laziest ways of doing this is to ask the weakness question. You say like, what is your weakness? Like if we were to eliminate you for a reason and not hire you, what would that reason be? You ask the person, they say, let me tell you, the first thing you need to know that I haven't mentioned so far is that I got a terrible problem with being violent. Don't get me wrong. I've got a lot of accomplishments. I did very well in school. All my bosses have loved me, in terms of my performance. But on the job, when people rub me the wrong way, when I get upset, I tend to get violent. And that has caused a lot of problems in the past. So that's probably my greatest weakness. And then the interviewer says, okay, well, thank you. Listen, I really appreciate your candor on that. It's great that you're being so forthcoming. And then they eliminate you because you have that flaw, So you just eliminated yourself, essentially. You walked right into an ambush. They sort of coaxed it out of you. And then there it is. There's the reason why we're going to eliminate this person. This is person number 10. Okay, they're gone. Next, let's go to number 9. Let's see if we can get them to give us like an obvious, clear reason to eliminate them. Then we can do this quickly, right? So the problem is that a lot of advice is very self-serving when it's coming from people on the other side of the table. They would love to advise you and get you to play right into their hand. Sometimes the interviewer is your ally. They're working with you. They're hoping that you will be the candidate, and they're hoping to really explore that with you. But at other times, they're your adversary. Okay, they're not working in your best interest. They're working in their best interest. And that's most clearly illustrated on the salary question. You're trying to push for as much money as you could possibly get. They're trying to haggle you down to accept the least amount of money you would ever possibly would. It's like polar opposite incentives, right? They're not your friend on this. They're not working with you. They're working actively against you. So when you get to a question kind of like, tell me about yourself, which is kind of a little bit neutral, you want to be on guard against, just sort of being fully open and honest about everything, because remember, these people are not necessarily your allies. They are also working against you on some level too. So that's what's going on there. So they would love for you to disclose everything, unfiltered. And then they really see who you are and they go, okay, let's eliminate this person. The problem is that your competitors who are a little more guarded, they tend to win. They tend to get the job instead of you when you take that attitude.